Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to break down the MPEP section by section, making patent law procedures clearer for you.
Exactly. Whether you're studying, practicing, or just curious, we aim to make this complex stuff accessible.
Today we're still in Chapter 1800, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, or PCT.
And we're focusing specifically on MPP Section 1836. It deals with rectification of obvious mistakes.
Right. Mistakes happen, even in big, important legal documents like patent applications. We're all human.
We certainly are. And this section, MPP 1836, it ties directly into PCT Rule 91. It provides a very specific path for fixing certain kinds of errors.
A specific path, and probably a specific limitations, I'm guessing.
Definitely limitations. It's not a free-for-all correction mechanism.
Okay, so what actually qualifies as an obvious mistake under this rule? Who gets to make that call? And, what are the consequences? Let's dive in.
Okay, so the core idea comes from PCT Rule 91. It says an applicant can ask to correct an obvious mistake.
In the application itself, or other documents too.
Both, actually. The application or other documents submitted later in the process.
So I spot a typo, I write in, say, oops, please fix. Sounds simple, but I bet it's not. How obvious does obvious have to be?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And yes, the bar is very high. It's not just obvious to you, the applicant.
Okay, so who then?
It has to be objectively obvious to the competent authority. That's the key phrase.
Competent authority.
Right.
Right. Does that mean one specific office? Or does it vary?
It varies. Depends on what kind of mistake it is and where it is in the application documents and also what stage you're at.
So different gatekeepers for different errors.
Pretty much. For instance,
Bah.
if the mistake is in the request part, the initial form with applicant names, title, priority stuff.
Yeah, the basics on the front.
Right. For that, the receiving office, the RO, is the competent authority.
So if I filed via the USPTO as my RO, they'd handle a typo in my name or something.
Correct. But if the mistake is deeper in, like in the description, the claims, or maybe the drawing.
Technical stuff?
Exactly. Then the responsibility shifts. It could be the International Searching Authority, the ISA, or maybe the International Preliminary Examining Authority, the IPEA. Depends on the timing.
Okay, different authorities for different parts. Let's get back to that objectively obvious standard. You said it's strict. Define strict. What do they need to see?
Okay, this is really the crux of it, and honestly, it's tough to meet. The competent authority needs to be convinced of two things, and this is critical based only on what's already in the application file.
Two things. Based only on the file itself. Got it. What are they?
First, they have to look at the document and see clearly that what's written is actually wrong, like demonstrably incorrect based on everything else in that application.
Okay, so step one. Prove it's definitely a mistake using only the application's own words.
Precisely. And second, they must be equally sure that the correction you're proposing is the only plausible intended meaning.
Not just a reasonable meaning, but the single only possible one.
Exactly. The only one that fits logically with the rest of the document.
Wow. Okay, so they look at it, say, yep, that's wrong. And based only on what's already here, the applicant absolutely must have meant this specific correction and nothing else makes sense. That's restrictive.
It absolutely is. And that part about using only the internal content, that's huge. It's explicitly stated.
So wait, I can't point to my original U.S. priority application and say, look, see, I got it right here, so the PCT version is obviously just a typo.
You cannot use external documents like a priority application to prove the mistake or justify the correction under Rule 91.
Seriously, even if it clearly shows the intent.
Seriously. The evaluation is confined to the four corners of the international application and the documents already submitted within the PCT system for that application.
That fundamentally changes things. It means the application itself has to contain the evidence of its own error and the unique solution.
You've got it. It has to be internally inconsistent in a way that points to only one fix. It's not about external proof of intent. It really highlights how crucial careful drafting is for the PCT filing itself.
So this Rule 91 isn't a general oops button. It's a very narrow path for self-evident errors where the document corrects itself, essentially.
That's a good way to put it. It's a tiny loophole for undeniable, internally obvious mistakes.
Okay, given how strict that objectively obvious based only on internal content rule is, what kind of errors are basically dead on arrival, things that will never qualify?
Well, the MPP and the PCT rules give some clear examples of what's not rectifiable this way. A major one is leaving out entire elements or whole sheets.
Like forgetting page 5 of the description or figure 3.
Exactly. You can't use Rule 91 to add missing pages or drawings. That would be adding new matter, essentially.
Makes sense. What else is excluded?
Mistakes in the abstract are specifically mentioned as not being correctable under this rule.
Huh, okay. The abstract is out.
And another really important one.
Yeah.
You can't use this to fix mistakes in priority claims if the change would alter the priority date itself.
Right. No fiddling with priority dates after the fact using this mechanism. So big omissions, abstract errors, priority date changes, those are out. What kind of mistakes might actually squeak through?
Generally, we're talking about minor things. Clear typographical errors, obvious grammatical slips, maybe small, undeniable errors in formulas, chemical or mathematical.
Like spelling water as water when the whole document is about water.
Potentially, yes, if the context makes it utterly unambiguous. The absolute key is that the correction cannot change the substantive technical disclosure. It has to be superficial, in a way.
Could you revisit that chemical formula example just to really hammer home how the only plausible meaning from internal content works?
Sure. Let's stick with the water example. Say your application describes HO in great detail, its properties, structure, reactions, everything points unmistakably to HO. But in one single place, maybe table heading, you accidentally write HO.
Okay, missing the subscript too.
Right. Now, if the entire rest of the application talks about two hydrogens, discusses bonding consistent only with H-arrow, uses properties only water has, then HO is demonstrably wrong based on internal evidence.
Got it. The application itself contradicts HO.
Yes, and if, based on all that internal evidence, HO is the only chemical species that fits everything else described, then correcting HO to HO might be deemed an obvious mistake, rectifiable under Rule 91.
Because the application itself screams this should be HO.
Essentially, yes.
Mm.
The internal consistency demands that correction, and no other interpretation makes sense within that document. It's resolving that internal contradiction.
Okay, I think I get the stringency now. What's the timing? Is there a deadline to ask for these corrections?
Yes, there is. You need to submit the request for rectification within 26 months of the priority date.
26 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And if it is authorized, if the authority agrees it's an obvious mistake, what happens then?
Good news then. If authorized, the correction is treated as if it were there from the beginning. It gets retroactive effect back to the original filing date of the document that had the mistake.
So it cleans up the record, basically.
Exactly. It's considered part of the application as originally filed for legal purposes.
Now, how does the applicant find out the decision? And who else knows?
The competent authority, whether it's the RO, ISA, or IPE, has to notify both the applicant and the International Bureau, the IB, about its decision. They'll say whether it was authorized or refused.
And the IB keeps track of all this?
They do. If it's authorized, the IB keeps the request letter and the corrected sheets. If it's refused, they keep a record of that refusal too.
What happens if it is refused? If your mistake didn't meet that high, obvious standard, are you just stuck?
Well, within the PCT process itself, if it's refused, the applicant does have one option. You can request that the refusal decision and maybe the arguments you submitted get published along with the application.
Ah, so even if you can't fix it, you can make the attempt part of the public file history.
Precisely. It adds transparency, shows you tried, shows why it was denied by the international authority.
Okay, now fast forward. The PCT application enters the national phase, say here in the U.S. before the USPTO. If the correction was authorized internationally, is the USPTO bound by that? Do they have to accept the corrected version?
That's a really critical point, especially for U.S. practice. The answer is no. They are not automatically bound.
Wait, really? The international authority says, yes, obvious mistake, here's the correction, but the U.S. can just ignore it.
They can choose to disregard the rectification authorized during the international phase.
Huh. Why? Doesn't that undermine the PCT system a bit?
It's a provision that exists. However, there's a procedural safeguard. The national office, like the USPTO, can only disregard the correction after they've given you, the applicant, a chance to comment or argue why the correction should stand.
Okay, so they can't just silently ignore it. You get a chance to make your case again at the national level.
Correct. You get an opportunity to respond before they make a final decision on whether to accept the internationally authorized correction.
All right, let's pull this all together. MPE, Section 1836, PCT Rule 91. What's the big takeaway for someone trying to understand the patent system, maybe prepping for the bar exam, or filing these applications?
Well, I think the main point is that this rule provides a formal, structured way to correct certain errors which promotes procedural fairness. But it's incredibly narrow.
Yeah, that narrowness seems key. It's about balancing the need to fix clear slips with the need to maintain the integrity of the application as filed, right? You can't let people rewrite things later.
Exactly. That super strict definition of obvious, especially the part about only using internal evidence, really protects against substantive changes being snuck in disguised as corrections. It ensures the application stands on its own merits as filed, unless there's an undeniable self-correcting internal flaw.
It really drives home how vital it is to get the application right the first time, especially for PCT filings, that safety net we mentioned. It's got massive holes.
It really does.
Yeah.
Relying on Rule 91 is generally not a primary strategy. It's a last resort for a very specific type of error. Understanding this specific procedure, its high hurdles, and its limitations is crucial for anyone working with international applications.
Absolutely. That was a great breakdown of MPP Section 1836. Really clarifies the obvious mistake landscape.
Glad we could shed some light on it for you.
And a huge thank you, as always, to Mike Shepard, our creative director, for pulling together this entire MPP audio series. His work is invaluable in making this material easier to grasp.
Indeed. And just the standard reminder for everyone listening, this summary was put together using AI tools. It might have errors or leave things out. It's purely for educational discussion.
Right. It's absolutely not legal advice. For the definitive word, always go to the official MPP, talk to a qualified instructor, or consult a registered patent attorney or agent.
Please do.
So, final thought to leave you with. Considering just how strict that objectively obvious from internal content only standard is, how does that reality force patent practitioners to think differently about clarity, consistency, and potential ambiguities during the initial drafting stage itself? Something to ponder.